Mark, have you heard of the story of Randall Reid? He was a
No.
gentleman out of Atlanta. Let me tell his story. I think it was late 2022. He was stopped for a moving violation outside of Atlanta, and he was arrested for a charge out of Louisiana. The charge was stealing designer purses. I think it was buying designer handbags on a with a stolen credit card, with a stolen identity. Now, he had actually never been to Louisiana. The warrant was based on facial recognition technology, and he ended up in jail for 6 days and missed a week of work. They had a grainy surveillance picture from a store surveillance video. The detective uploaded that photograph or part of that, a still from that video, into facial recognition technology, and it came back with a match. Now, in his affidavit or in his statement to get the warrant, he didn't say that he used facial recognition technology, and this is a common thing right now in law enforcement. What he said was a credible source identified the suspect as Randall Reid. So Reid gets pulled over. Now, actually, what I think had happened was the officers that stopped him were never really able to give a clear answer onto why he was stopped. And I think actually what happened is not only was it facial recognition, it was then LPR technology, license plate reader technology, which identified his car. They then went looking for the car, found him, and stopped him. And it was basically a felony arrest. This is a case where technology has maybe gotten a little ahead of us. And even in the law enforcement realm, there aren't specific rules about how this technology is described. Should one be able to characterize facial recognition technology as a credible source and not tell a judge or a magistrate or a DA that this was facial recognition technology that was used?
No. To me, that's not telling the entire story. If you're providing a court with an affidavit, you have to spell out all the facts, in my opinion. They were able to, I think, in good faith, identify the suspect here to the best of their knowledge. And then you said make the stop with the LPR, the license plate reader. But did it turn out that this was a misidentification?
Yes. It
It
was
wasn't
not the guy.
it
It was
wasn't the
not
guy
the
at
guy.
all. It's so complicated because even before any facial recognition technology, law enforcement misidentifies people,
All the
unfortunately, all
time.
the time.
Yeah.
So it's not a new phenomenon. The question is here with the new technology, it's how ubiquitous it can be. And this referring back to that passage I read from the article about the low success rate of the facial recognition. So we're dealing with a much larger scope now is the issue. But I think certainly that if an officer is writing his affidavit to a court to get a warrant, it's like, hey, just spell the whole thing out and say, here's how it worked. And then let the judge decide whether or not it's a legitimate investigative tool. But it's a great example. This is an absolutely tangible example of where it fails.
Yeah. And I think it failed in this case because there was really no other investigation done. There was
Correct.
never in it there wasn't anything done to corroborate that he was even in the state at that time,
Yeah.
right?
See, that's just lazy.
Right. So all that was, and that's the issue. Like, even if it had been a witness identification, I would think there would have been more work done to corroborate that it was really the person, that he was in this state, whether they somehow get his phone and see if his phone was there or whatever. The normal steps you would take in an investigation. And
Credit
instead it
card,
was,
ATM records,
yeah,
all of
instead
these
it was
things.
just, hey, facial recognition hit. I'm going to call it a credible informant and we're going to get an arrest warrant for this guy and move on.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
a prime
problematic.
example. It's
And
very
I think
problematic.
what I've seen, Mark, and I don't know if you came across this in looking at information for the show, is less effective or less efficient facial recognition, less effective the older you get. It struggles with women, it struggles with people of color. The
Yes.
success rate of positive identifications goes way down.
Yes.
And when there's companies selling this capability, I'm sure those are not things that they advertise. And it probably gives cops also a false sense of, I don't want to say security, but a false sense of how successful or how good this technology is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would imagine that technology is going to continue to improve, be refined. Again, that may be a bad thing for humanity in general, but talking specifically about the technology itself, it will probably improve like most technologies do. But you're absolutely right. That was also in this article about the bias factor. And they use the word biased. I would be more careful and say that it's inaccuracy
Mhm.
when it comes to different ethnicities. So that's 100% right. And of course, that raises all types of social and cultural, political issues if the technology is more or less effective depending on the pigment of your skin. It has to be consistent. It must
Mhm.
be consistent. Even if it's consistently inaccurate, it has to be at least that. It has to be just as inaccurate from this race to that race, from this gender to that gender, or we're not dealing with a tool that we should be touching in law enforcement.